What's up everyone? GameDad here, and in today's video I'm going to sit down and rank all of the home consoles that I have. Now, there are a bunch of them, so let's go ahead and just dive in and take a look at all of my consoles, ranked all the way from S down to F. Also, please remember that these are my personal opinions and my personal ranks, and yours may differ, and that is okay. And if they do, let me know down in the comments below where your consoles rank. And if you are new to the channel or you just haven't yet, please be sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons, as well as that little notification bell so you can alert every time I got a new video coming out. Now, let's go ahead and dive in and get those consoles ranked. Alright, so we have 35 consoles to get through, so we are going to go ahead and just start building out this rank list. Now, I did kind of do a little work ahead of time, that way this video wouldn't be too long, but we'll go ahead and go through this right now. We're going to start with my F tier, and the first one I have on this F tier is the Sega 32X. Now, this one, I don't have a lot of games for it. I barely ever play it, and commercially, I mean, it was definitely a flop. So this one is definitely in my F tier. After that, we have the Atari 5200. Now, this one, it has notoriously bad controllers. I do have a nice little chunk of games for it, and some of them definitely are fun, but overall, I just don't care for the console, and I actually rarely play this one. I would much rather play the 2600 or the 7800. And then next up, we have the CDI. Now, this one, I was kind of debating if it was an F or a D. I put it in an F just because commercially it was a huge flop. It did not have a huge library of games. I have a good chunk of games for it. I have like 20 or so games. But honestly, most of them are just complete garbage. But some of them are so bad that they're good, like the Zelda games. And next up, we have the Atari Jaguar. I would say that this one is the worst one in my F tier. This console, I don't like it. It is not good graphically. The audio is trash. If you've ever played Cybermorph, all you want to do is punch the screen to shut that person up. And I'm not a fan. I think I have played this console a total of like 5 or 6 times. And most of the time is just so I could capture some footage. And outside of that, it's really just not a fun console to use. All right, next up in my D tier. Now, this first one, it is in my D tier, but I will say it is a really fun console. It's super simplistic because of its age, but that is the Magnavox Odyssey 2. Let's see if we can drag that up into there. Oh. So the Magnavox Odyssey 2. And this console, it's super fun. I've never really used the keyboard for that much. I don't know if there was like just better office applications or something like that. But overall, it's more just fun, simplistic games. And I actually do have quite a library for this one. I have no idea how many games are in the full library for it, but overall, this is a super fun one. But compared to the other consoles, it would be in my D tier. Now, up next, we have the Atari 2600. Super fun console, got a lot of great games on it. They're pretty much, a lot of them are just kind of repeats or clones of other games, and that's okay, but I will say that at least 2 or 3 times a year, I will bust this out, and I will just play through a ton of 2600 games. I've even streamed playing 2600 games from the console, and it was a lot of fun. Next up, we have the ColecoVision. Super fun console. I'm ranking it a little bit lower than the 2600 because I haven't played it as much and I don't have as big a library, but overall it is a really fun console, and honestly the graphics on it are, in my opinion, far superior to the 2600. Next up, we have the Sega CD. Now, this, again, is one because I don't have a big library of it, and I haven't played it a ton. The games that I have played were pretty fun, but overall, from this era, I would rather play the cartridge-based games than the CD games because I just didn't find the CD games as fun. Next up is the 3DO, and the 3DO, I think it's fun. It definitely has some good games, like Return Fire. That one is really fun on this, but I think this was more marketed as kind of like the light gun console at home. It definitely has a lot of those American laser games, kind of games for it. And overall, it's just kind of meh. There's just 1 or 2 titles that I really like. Up next, we have the Intellivision. Now, the Intellivision was actually one of the first like classic or retro consoles that I ever got. I first got my Intellivision back when I was like, I don't know, maybe 11 or so. It was a flea market find, had no idea what it was, thought it looked cool, came with a ton of games, and I mean, I had a lot of fun with it. This is the only console I will say, however, every time I play this console with my mom, she beats me. It is the most obnoxious thing. I can beat her at any video game unless it's on the Intellivision. She beats me every time, and I don't know what it is because she can't game. So apparently, I am just horrible at playing games on the Intellivision. All right, next up, we have the Atari 7800. This one has good graphics. It's got a pretty solid library. I like the controller on this one a lot more, and I actually did a video on a modded controller that is NES style that plays on the 7800, so it's really nice being able to play with that. But overall, I just don't have a huge library for it, so it doesn't get a lot of love. I don't play this one that often. All right, now moving up to the C tier. First up is the Nintendo 64. So we're going to throw that up in the C tier. All right, now the N64 is a super fun console. I remember when this came out when I was a kid, and I remember all of my friends getting it and me not getting it. Now, as an adult, now that I got money to be able to buy games, stuff like that, I have been going for a complete collection. I don't know how long it will take me to get there, but as of right now, I have about 2/3 of the collection. So definitely getting there. I have pretty much all of the common games that you can get. All that's left is the expensive stuff. So I'll probably just kind of space those out over time. That way I'm not spending a ton of money all up front to get this console up and running. But overall, it's super fun. I mean, graphically, nowadays, it doesn't really hold up. But back then, I mean, this thing was amazing. Up next, we have the Famicom Disk System. Now, this, I don't have a huge collection of Famicom Disk System games, but I will say I really enjoy playing them. It's a lot of fun because typically the graphics aren't necessarily better, but the audio is way better. Like playing Zelda on an FDS compared to playing Zelda on the NES or the Famicom is just so much better. The audio is way better, and it's a much more enjoyable experience. Next up, we have the GameCube. Now, the GameCube is one of those where I really like the first-party titles for this, and I like a couple of the third-party ones, but overall, I don't have a huge GameCube collection. I am not actively looking for any games, but if I come across any that were from my childhood, things like, you know, the Pikmin games or any of the Mario games, like Mario Sunshine is probably my top Mario game. I love Mario Sunshine. And I mean, this console was just so unique and weird, and the controller was just such a weird out of this world thing, and I love that. I love random controllers like that. So this is a C tier console for me. Next up, we have the Dreamcast. This console is super underrated in my opinion. It was definitely ahead of its time when it came out, but the console is so much fun. It has so many good games on it, especially if you want to do like fighting games, stuff like that. It was just a great thing that came out. I remember when it was first launched, and me and a bunch of friends, we all went in together and rented one from a Blockbuster. And what did we get? 1080 snowboarding, and we just played that game all weekend long. This console, it was awesome. And it's still fun to play today. I mean, I play this console all the time still. All right, and up next we have the Master System. Okay, this one, I really like the games for it. I really like the coloring and the aesthetic of the games. They are definitely a nice, I wouldn't say high quality, but for the era, they're a very nice quality of game and audio, and the games are just fun. I like the controller. I don't really care for the design of the console itself. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of weird looking to me, and not in a good way. I don't know, it's always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But overall, I do like the Master System, so it's in my C tier. Up next, we have the TurboGrafx 16. This console's awesome. If you like shoot 'em ups, this is the console for you. There are so many games on here that are just total bullet hell, and it is so much fun. And plus, before, like, they had the Master System cards and stuff like that, but this is the system that really took Hue cards to the next level. And I don't know what it is, just the idea of the entire game being on that card and you slide it in and latch over the power button and everything. I don't know. I just like the aesthetic of actually getting in and playing a game. Super fun. I don't really care for, the turbo part with the sliders and stuff. I pretty much never use them, but overall the gameplay is a lot of fun. Next up, we have the Sega Saturn. And I like the Sega Saturn. It's got a great controller. I love the controller on the Sega Saturn. But overall, I didn't really care for the game library personally. And it wasn't really big in my circle of friends or anything growing up. So I never had a lot of exposure to it. So I don't really have a nostalgia for it. But overall, I do have fun playing some of the different games that there are, like what is it, a Panzer Dragoon and stuff like that. Those games are fun, but overall, it's not a console that I go back to a lot, and I don't have a huge library, but it was impressive for its time. That's why it's in my C tier. All right, and the last one is the PlayStation 1. Now, this one, I did have a bunch of friends that had this, so I got to play it a lot. I didn't have one personally myself growing up, but I remember, playing Tony Hawk and having a blast, playing Tomb Raider, all those kind of games, and it was just an awesome time. Great game, huge library, but there are better PlayStations, in my opinion. All right, and now we are moving on to the B tier, and first up in the B tier is the Xbox 360. Now, this is the first home console I ever bought for myself. This is around when I started having money, I was working, and I bought the Xbox 360 Elite console when it came out. I didn't get the console when it launched. I didn't have enough money at the time, and I had heard that there was an HDMI version coming out, so I waited and I got the 360 Elite, and that console was awesome. I played that thing nonstop all the time, and then it red ringed, then I got it replaced, and again played it nonstop all the time. Then that console died and I replaced it with another 360. So the 360 is, other than the NES, I believe is the biggest piece of my overall game collection. I have so many games on this, and I don't even remotely have anywhere near the entire library, because this console is just, it has so much. There were so many games that came out for this thing, and the majority of them were really good, actually, in my opinion anyways. Now, next up, we have the OG Xbox. Now, the 360 is the first one I bought for myself. The Xbox, believe it or not, is the first console that was ever actually bought for me. My brother had an NES growing up, but my parents didn't really care for video games all that much. And I remember for Christmas one year, my brother and I were at a Best Buy, and I forget, he was picking up something in the store or whatever, and there was a huge mountain of Xboxes there. And we're at the checkout line, and he just, out of the blue, he's just like, "Hey, do you want one of those?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to get an Xbox." And he's like, "All right, go grab one." And just out of the blue, for Christmas, my brother bought me an Xbox. And it was like such a huge shock, and it was awesome. I played the crap out of that console. And I mean, I still play it today. I mean, the console is great. The game library is phenomenal on it. And in my opinion, the graphics actually hold up pretty well, even to this day. Now, next up in my B tier is the Xbox One. Now, I got my original Xbox One on launch as a, I don't know if it was an anniversary present. I think it was a Christmas present from my wife. She got me the Xbox One on launch, and immediately I sunk dozens of hours into playing Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. And I just couldn't believe the fidelity. I mean, this console was amazing graphically. The audio was insane. The Kinect was completely pointless, but overall it was a really great console, and I've got a pretty decent library. I don't even think I think I have probably less than 5% of the overall library that was released for this console, but the games that I have, I really enjoy playing, and every once in a while when I find some like bargain bin titles, I'll do blind pickups and still have a blast playing this console. I don't have the original Xbox One that I got before. It ended up dying, and I ended up trading it in and got an Xbox One X. So I do have an upgraded version of that now, but I still play Xbox games all the time on that console. All right, now next up, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but I have my reasons and I will go over them. Next up is the Series X in my B tier. Now, let me explain. It's not a bad console, okay? It's obviously insanely powerful. It's got whatever it is, 12 teraflops or whatever. But there are no exclusive titles. This thing is essentially an Xbox One emulator. I mean, that's really all it is right now. There are no titles that are exclusive to this console. You can play any of the Xbox games that this can on the Xbox One, with the exception of maybe Cyberpunk, but that's fine because that barely runs anywhere. But overall, it doesn't have the library yet. Once it has exclusive titles like, the new Halo, the new Fable, those things, I guarantee this is going to move up in my list. But for now, all it is, like, I don't regret getting my Series X, but I'm definitely not playing it as much as my PS5. So it will move up eventually, but right now, with where it sits, it's a B console for me. Next up for this tier, we have the Nintendo Wii. This is such a fun console. Can't really think of any other consoles that have more bloatware than this does, but motion controls, everything, it seemed gimmicky at first, but it became so much fun, and there are so many family and party games, and I have had so many, like, countless nights and hours of playing with family and friends on all the different games on here, and no matter what their age, they can all get into it and all have a blast, and I love that. This console, it's great. It's not A or S tier for me, but it's still a great console. Moving on from there, we have the PS3. Now, I didn't get one of these at launch. I got it way later on because I wanted a Blu-ray player, and I could have either spent $400 on a Blu-ray player, or I could spend $400 on a PS3 and get a Blu-ray player and a game console. So that's what I did. And I love my PS3. It's awesome. I mainly got it because of, exclusive titles like the Uncharted series and stuff like that, and the Infamous series. Those are probably two of my favorite franchises on on PlayStation. But overall, I mean, it was a super fun console, and I still play these games constantly these days. All right, now up next, we got the Wii U. Very underrated console, in my opinion. The library, it's not great, but I mean, yeah, the controller is kind of gimmicky, but it really does give you a lot of information that you would not be able to get on other consoles. Like, for instance, playing Wind Waker on Wii U, the HD version, it's so cool to have the whole map just always available and just always right there. And I love that about it. I mean, I think the gamepad is awesome. I do wish that they would have enabled people to be able to actually add additional gamepads, but the whole tying it to one console thing, I think that was a marketing mistake. They could have easily sold more gamepads. I know I would have bought a full set of gamepads to be able to play on so everyone could experience that, instead of like, well, no, I get the extra screen, not you. So it had its obvious flaws, but overall, I really like the console, and I really like the first-party titles that came out for it. Now, up next for this tier is the Famicom. And the Famicom, I have an okay amount of games for it, and most of the time I have no idea what's going on in them because obviously this is the Japanese NES, but it's still fun. I still enjoy playing it, and in order to play my FDS games, I need one of these. So, I like this console. Next up, we are moving on to the A tier. First up in the A tier is the NES. I love the NES. I am about 3/4 of the way through collecting the entire library. I will say right now, unless prices come dramatically down, I'll never have a complete library of NES games because I can't afford things like Little Samson and stadium events and stuff like that. I don't have that kind of money, and that's all right with me. I've collected every game from my childhood that I remember and loved playing with my brother, and I have collected a bunch of other games that were just awesome from the time that friends had, and it is such a great console. It has a huge library for what it is, and it's just so much fun. Love this console. Next up is the PS4. Now, I don't have that big a library for the PS4, but I have played and beaten pretty much every single PS4 game that I have. Plus, this has PSVR, and if you are just getting into VR or you want a much simpler way to play VR, hands down, the PSVR is awesome. Now, there are easier ways since then, like with the Oculus Quest and Quest 2, things like that. But I I love my PS4. I have played that thing so much. I don't know if there's a way to check how many hours you've put into a console total, but I'm pretty sure it's a few thousand. So I love the PS4. PS4 is awesome. Next up, we have the Super Famicom. So this is the Japanese Super Nintendo. I have a few games for it. I do like it. Again, there's the whole translation issue that I don't speak Japanese. For the most part, I can get through some stuff, but it's kind of fun to see the differences that some games had based on the region. And I mean, it's cool. I like the style of it, the way it looks. I like the aesthetic of it better than I do the Super Nintendo, and I really like the controller more. I love the colored buttons on it. I don't know, it's just fun. It makes it more fun and kid friendly. Now, next up for the A tier is the Sega Genesis. This console was awesome. I had exactly one friend that had a Genesis growing up. Everybody else had Nintendo stuff, and it was so much fun. I remember we would constantly be playing either Carnage or we would be playing Vector Man. And you better believe that the very first game I ever picked up when I picked up a Genesis was Vector Man, because that game is awesome. This has a massive library and arguably better graphics than the Super Nintendo, in my opinion anyways. I think Nintendo does a really good job of making things look great on their consoles when their hardware isn't necessarily up to spec. But the Genesis, I don't know, it was marketed as the cool kid console, and it definitely was. It was a much cooler console. All right, now moving on to my A tier. We got 4 consoles left. Okay, first up is the Nintendo Switch. Sorry, this is my S tier, the top tier. All right. The Nintendo Switch. This is hands down my most played console, even more than all my other consoles, and that is simply because I can take it on the go. I can have the same exact experience playing in front of a TV or taking it on the go. Yeah, the graphics, they take a hit because it's not upscaling, but honestly, I don't care. I think they look phenomenal, and it's great. The games are so small, you can easily just, throw a couple games in your pocket, throw them in a case, whatever, and just go. And I will say that 95% of the time, I am not playing on a TV. I am playing this almost exclusively in handheld mode. And I love this console. It is going to be amazing when the new Switch comes out. You better believe that I am going to get that, because I can't wait to see what they do in the next handheld. Now, next up, we have the Super Nintendo. Super Nintendo was just an amazing console. Graphically, musically, story-wise, game library. I love everything about the Super Nintendo. It is a phenomenal console, and some of my most favorite games of all time are on this console. Love it. Next up, PS2. If not for anything else, just the fact that the library for the PS2 is so massive. It's crazy. There are so many games on this console, and nearly all of them are awesome. There's definitely some crap. Every console has some horrible games, but I rarely come across a PS2 game that I can't have fun with. And I love the PS2. I have the fat PS2. I have multiple colors of the slim PS2, and it is such a fun console, and they came out with some really cool accessories and controllers for it. Now, last up in my S tier is the PlayStation 5. Now, this suffers from a similar issue as the Series X. There are, in regards to not as many games, but the PS5 has exclusive games. Okay, the Series X does not have exclusive games. The PS5 does. And when you compare specs and compare with side-by-side tests, honestly, they operate the same. At this point, they're just computers in fancy shells. That's it. But the exclusive games that come on the PS5 are awesome. I think I have something like 5 PS5 games. Yeah, I have 5 PS5 games right now, and I have platinumed every single one of them except for Demon's Souls. I haven't started Demon's Souls yet. But the console is amazing. It's beautiful. The controller It is hands down the best controller I have ever used. The DualSense controller is miraculous. It is so cool. The haptics in it, just everything about it, it is so great. And that's why PS5 is in my S tier. And there you have it, everyone. That is all of the home consoles that I have, all 35 of them. Now, I do have a bunch more consoles. Those are things like handhelds and Tiger Electronics, arcades, things like that. But these were all my dedicated home consoles and where I rank them in the ranking list. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, these are my personal opinions and how I rank my own consoles. But if you rank them differently, I want to hear about it down below. I would be curious to know why you rank a console differently or put it higher or lower. And while you're down there, please be sure to also hit those like and subscribe buttons, as well as that little notification bell so you can alert every time I got a new video coming out. Now, as always, I'm GameDad. I thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you later.